Alrighty, welcome back everybody. In this video, I'm going to be revisiting the time control, time rewind, fast forward, time mechanics project. And in the previous video for this project, we had gotten everything set up in terms of controlling time from rewinding, pausing, and being able to scrub back and forth completely through the entire series of recorded gameplay frames. So in this video, I'm going to be doing something a little bit more visually interesting, I think, which is rewinding the actual animations on the player. And if you look over here, I've already created a sprites folder, and I already have my player run frames in the sprites folder. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started by making an actual animation. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually take these frames and create my animation that I'm going to be using for this. So let me first set these things up a little bit. I know that they're really tiny, so I'm going to change the pixels per unit on them to something like 30 or maybe 20. And then set the filter mode to point so that they look nice and pixelated. Apply that, and then I'll drag them into the scene, and dragging multiple sprites into the scene in Unity is going to automatically create an animation for me. So this will be player run. And I'll go ahead and just hit play here so we can watch this animation really quick. There he goes. Nice little run. Okay, so now maybe I can attach this animation to the player instead of having this be a separate game object. So let's go to player. I'll add the animation controller, the animator, I should say, and attach the animation controller to it, and control. There it is. And I'll go ahead and replace this square so that the very first frame is also the very first frame of the animation. And then I'll go ahead and hit play, and now our player should have this animation as well. And I'm moving around. However, the animation is currently independent of the time control. If you look, I hit pause. Everything is still running. I'm rewinding. He's still running forward in his animation instead of backward. And that's not what we want. So in order to get this animation rewinding, let's go ahead and set up some code. I'm going to head over to the time controlled because I'm going to make the assumption that every time controlled may have an animation attached to it as well. Okay, so what this time controlled object wants to know is what our current animation clip is that we want to be playing. Say current animation. And luckily Unity has this handy method for basically taking any animation and sampling it onto our game object at any specific time in the animation that we want. Since we're already using this method and we're overriding it in our subclasses, I'm just going to go ahead and create another method responsible for updating our animations. Update animation. And let's just say if we do have an animation, then we're going to use that sample method that I mentioned. So current animation, sample on our own game object at the animation time, at the current animation time, right, which we're going to have to create here. Let's say current animation, or just animation time is fine. And since we're going to be needing to update and keep track of this animation time, I'm going to go ahead and put that in here in the time update, and then any subclass that wants to make sure that their animation time is being updated correctly can go ahead and just call the base time update from their own. So let's go ahead and increment the animation time. So animation time plus equals time.delta time. And the animation time isn't going to be growing forever, right? Our animation is a specific length, and we want to make sure that once we've reached that length, our animation time pretty much goes back to 0, or the beginning of our animation. And that information is stored within the animation clip. So if animation time is greater than or equal to, or just greater than current animation.length, I think it's length. And we'll also want to make sure that, yeah, again, right, if we have this animation available, to be able to do this. There we go. So then we're just going to be setting our animation time to the actual difference between the animation time and the animation length, because we want to know how far over the animation length we went over. So that's how far into the beginning of the animation we actually are. So animation time minus current animation.length. So now we just need the time controller to actually do its job of recording the animation time and feeding it back into us when it's rewinding and fast forwarding through the timeline. I can also first go back and update the player just to make sure that this method of animation is actually working. So let's go to the player here. And as you can see, the current animation is not set. I'm going to go ahead and set it to the player run animation here. there. And then as for this animator here, we can go ahead and disable it. Since we won't be using it, we're going to be manually sampling our own. Normally I would just remove the component altogether. However, it seems like using the sample animation method, it requires that an animator is still attached. All right, so let's go to our player script and make sure that the player is actually calling in timed update, our actual base class method, so it can take care of the animation timing for us. So that would be time update. And then let's just see if that works. It doesn't. Of course it doesn't, because I'm not calling the update animation method from the time controller. So let's go to time controller, right? So where we're calling time update, we can also go ahead and say time object update animation. And then with any luck, we'll actually see this play out this time. And there it is, playing the animation like we want. Now we just have to make the time controller actually record the animation time and then feed it back into the time controlled objects. Right, so back to the time controller again. So here's where we're actually recording our data. So let's go ahead and, well, let's add it to the data, right? Let's see here, yeah. Recorded data. I'm just gonna add another float here, and this is gonna be the animation time. Okay, so let's go back to where we're recording it. Actually record it. Data.animation time is time object.animation time. And then feed it back in when we're rewinding here, and also when we're forwarding here. So time object.animation time is data.animation time, and then that same line right here. And that should be everything. All right, back to Unity. I'm gonna go ahead and delete this player run 1. It's a little distracting. All right, now let's see the finished result here. So we can pause, rewind, and fast forward the animations. So I'm running, moving left and right, running the animation, pressing pause. The animation's paused at a specific frame. Pause, 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 pause. Right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and press rewind. And it's not actually rewinding the animation. Pressing fast forward, it's staying in the animation. And that is because, oh right, because we're not actually calling the update animation when we're fast forwarding and rewinding. So let's just make sure we do that after we pass that information back to our timed objects. All right, that should do it. Let's play here, playing the animation, pause, pausing the animation, let's go, pause, now rewind. There's rewinding, fast forward, it's fast forwarding. Pretty difficult to tell. It's not that great of an animation. I made this thing like, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago maybe. But you can kind of see here that it's going one way versus the other. And that's pretty cool. And maybe if we select the player here, we can actually see the frames changing correctly. So let me go ahead and hit play here. So pause, you can see it's paused on frame 6. I'll press rewind. Goes to frame 5, 4, 3, 2, goes up 3, 4, 5, 6, back down, back up, back down. And you can see that in the on the sprite here, sprite renderer frames changing, and you can see the animation time flying. And that is it. That is the simplest way I've found so far to show the concept of rewinding and scrubbing through a timeline of an animation in Unity. So hopefully you liked this, thought it was cool. Like the video, subscribe. I'll definitely be doing more interesting stuff like this in the future. Peace out.